I remember when I was just at school, I'd be about 4 or 5, I used to live next to a wood, and I daydreamed that I would be sort of walking through this wood and I'd have this little house under these tree roots, and that this is where I lived. But meanwhile, when I was walking, I would have this fantastic dress and just come upon 1 or 2 little boys that I knew who'd just really be impressed by this dress. When I was little, I did not think of myself as pretty at all. For a start, I had straight brown hair, and if you were pretty, it was supposed to be these golden curls. And Shirley Temple was the model for children in those days. But nevertheless, I always had this idea that somehow I could make myself better, that one day I would be able to do something. I was making my own clothes a lot, even tailored suits by the time I was about 16. But I never had the idea of working in fashion, never. Eventually, I went to teacher training college when I was 18. With the idea that I would take art as my main subject, and if it worked out, that'd be all right, and if it didn't, then I'd be a school teacher. So I became a school teacher. It was my plan to go to university and to study English and French literature. This is what I wanted to do. But at that time, my boyfriend, Malcolm McLaren, had left college, and he wanted some help with a project that he was interested in, and that involved me making clothes. Malcolm and we were interested in rebellion. So at the time when people were still wearing platforms and flared trousers, this is when we had our teddy boy look. Soon after that we got bored, and we changed the shop each time we had a new interest. Nowadays I would present a collection. Punk was an evolution, a synthesis of putting all these things together that we were interested in. I think that punk rock was the most heroic rock and roll movement that there's ever been. I do stand by that. I think it was a fantastic thing to do. It was something I believed in at the time. I think Johnny Rotten really believed in it in the beginning, that somehow we were going to keep on attacking all the icons of the establishments because we wanted the world to be different. We were always literary and graphic about our ideas, and we put them on T-shirts. And at one time we were busted under the Obscene Publications Act for holding an indecent exhibition. I was in court about 4 times after that, and I was threatened with prison at that point. Luckily, I'd stopped being so interested in it by then, so I didn't have to go to prison. I've been coming to the V&A since I've been doing fashion, as far as I can remember. Certainly at the time of the pirate collection, that's when I really started to be interested in historical cut. For me, the contact with the clothes themselves and how people wore them is just fascinating. For example, in paintings, a lady at her toilet, you'll often see a pin cushion full of gold pins, and there are songs about pins. Pins were expensive, precious things, and the garments were all pinned. Before I did this dress, I tried to copy the pink dress of Madame Pompadour, which is in a painting in the Wallace collection by Boucher. I just made that same 18th century dress with the feeling of the life and movement that you get in those paintings, and I created this asymmetrical one instead, which I do think therefore is modern. You see, you can't copy the past, you can't, but there are things in it that when you start to try to copy it, that's when you discover something from today, because you have different fabrics, and if you change one thing, you change everything. The impressive thing about looking at historical costume is the lust for change. And you have got to have a foundation to achieve these effects. And so you have the possibility of restriction and you have the possibility of padding. The collection that I'm probably most proud of is a collection, Vive la Cocotte, because I think in this day and age of conformity and not seeing anything dramatic and dynamic, I think in this day and age to have invented a silhouette that nobody had ever quite seen before is an incredible achievement when I think about it. And yes, it was incredibly exaggerated. I always say that Chanel is the couturier who was the most cruel to women. She was a stick, and the only way that that kind of clothes looks good is if you have no shape hardly. You've got to be like a coat hanger. I'm not one of the people who subscribe to this idea that a woman is beautiful the more natural she is. I don't like the no makeup look, and a beauty in a t-shirt and jeans isn't interesting to me at all. I think it's ridiculous and incredibly self-obsessive to be having plastic surgery to change your body. I do think that padding is the answer if that's what you need. I think that the thing that I do is question everything. That is subversion. And I think that's what I do. I think I'm just doing that all the time. I think my clothes are a physical proposal of a question always of couldn't we look better this way? My ambassadors are my customers. I have lots and lots of customers who adore my clothes. People who understand my clothes are people who've actually put them on. So often I hear people thinking that they don't have the courage to wear them, but I think to put them on, once you've got them on, I think they give you the courage. You don't want to take them off. I sometimes, for convenience, work on a little doll to get a certain principle, just to see if it will work. Now then, this is a design that I worked out on this little doll for knitwear, and the pen lines are the divisions of different types of panels for knitted special stitching. But when I'd done it, I thought that I should exploit it by making this same design in fabric as well, using different colours for some of the panels, and in the case of this dress here, using different effects with lace, sometimes put on dark and light backgrounds, slightly different with two types of lace to create this effect that in fact refers to modern art. It's a sort of pastiche on that, really. Orthodoxy is the grave of intelligence. You're not thinking if you're doing what everybody else does. And it is a basic curiosity which needs to know, whether this is right or not, and whether something can be discovered from looking at things in a different way. And so I do think that my need to question is what I can offer to other people, ways of looking at things differently. The fashion is really non-stop. It must be the hardest job in the world. It's harder than doing film or anything. It's got to be, because you never take a break. And it would be almost like if you were a musician or a composer even, who had to just make all their own instruments or something before they could even do anything. You have to start, like the knitwear, for example, starts from little balls of wool, and then you end up with, everything just has to be from the smallest detail to the finished forward. I'm happy that they do realise that there's an irony in what I do, that clothes are very sexy and feminine and pretty and attractive, and that is actually where the subversion of them is, that you can make women have this wonderful feminine power. I measure myself according to how I push my brain, and so I measure myself really perhaps hardly at all in fashion. I measure myself by what I'm thinking. It's only when things strike your thoughts that you have any kind of knowledge. It sort of goes in. It's something you know that is right because of all the objectivity that you've tried to apply. It is a serious occasion because it's a very glamorous evening, and I guess that's serious these days. And also, I know that Moet and Chandon are considering the idea that this should be something that is repeated, that has a lot of status. And I thank them very much for considering me as the person to start with. When I do a fashion show, I don't these days really care what the journalists say, because they have their moods and whatever. I could say a lot more, but I won't. Come to think that there is possibly something called public opinion. It isn't just the latest thing that you're trying to catch, that's the last thing that somebody said, but actually something that is formed over time, because after a show I'm only interested in the kind of reaction to it, the warmth, if people were happy, if they had a pleasure, all this kind of thing. This is how I know if the show has been a success. It isn't what people say in the papers, because there is this groundswell of things. And I just want to say that I know that this is a very important event and all this stuff, but I know that a lot of people who came tonight came because they wanted to enjoy themselves, but I do know that you did come for me. I do know that, and I feel very humbly grateful for everything. Thank you.